Did you know Cleopatra didn't walk into Julius Caesar's palace like a queen? She was smuggled in like contraband, hidden inside a rolled-up rug or linen sack, carried past guards who would have arrested her on the spot. This is 48 BC in Alexandria. Cleopatra has been pushed out of power by her brother's faction. The palace is under enemy control, and her name is basically a death sentence inside the city. Then Caesar arrives, Rome's top power player, because Egypt's throne fight is now Rome's business. Cleopatra understands one brutal rule: whoever reaches Caesar first controls the story. If her enemies brief him first, she's finished. So she bets everything on one illegal, high-risk move: get face-to-face with Caesar before anyone can stop her. And that leads to the real question: who helped her pull this off? And how did she get past a palace that wanted her gone? Cleopatra isn't just a beautiful queen from pop culture. She's a calculated political player, born into the Ptolemaic dynasty, the Greek Macedonian family that ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great. She's unusually prepared for power. She's educated, she speaks multiple languages, and unlike many rulers in her dynasty, she can actually speak to Egyptians directly instead of relying on translators. But her biggest advantage becomes her biggest threat, because in her family, power isn't inherited peacefully, it's taken. Siblings don't just compete, they eliminate each other. By 48 BC, Cleopatra has already been pushed out of Alexandria by her younger brother's faction. Ptolemy XIII, a teen king on paper, but backed by men who control the palace and the army. The most important one to understand is his inner circle: advisors and commanders who don't want Cleopatra near the throne because she's independent and hard to control. So they cut her off from the capital, lock down the palace, and paint her as the problem. Cleopatra's situation is simple and brutal. She's still queen in name, but she has no guards, no palace, and no safe way to negotiate. Every road into Alexandria is watched, and if she's captured, there's no fair hearing. She becomes a loose end. Now add Caesar. Caesar doesn't show up in Egypt for sightseeing. He's chasing Rome's civil war politics, and Egypt is strategic and rich. Whoever sits on Egypt's throne can become Rome's ally or Rome's headache. Cleopatra knows that if she can secure Caesar's support, she doesn't need an army larger than her brothers. She needs the right decision from the right man. But here's the danger. Caesar is inside the palace zone, surrounded by information controlled by her enemies. If they speak first, Caesar hears one version of Cleopatra: unstable, risky, remove her. So Cleopatra's clock is ticking, because this isn't about whether she's brave. It's about whether she can reach Caesar before her brother's side closes the trap completely. And the only way to do that is with one person on the inside, someone willing to smuggle the queen through enemy gates. Egypt at this moment is a powder keg, and Alexandria is the match. Cleopatra's brother's side controls the palace, the city gates, and most of the soldiers inside the capital. Cleopatra's side is outside the city, trying to gather support, but she's fighting a war where the battlefield is politics as much as it is weapons. Every decision is about control. Who speaks first? Who looks legitimate? Who can claim the throne without the city turning on them? And because Egypt is one of the richest kingdoms on earth, this isn't just a family feud. It's a crisis that can pull foreign powers in. That's exactly why Julius Caesar shows up. He isn't arriving as a tourist, and he isn't arriving to save anyone. He arrives because Rome is in its own civil war, and Egypt is strategically too important to ignore. Egypt supplies grain and money, and whoever rules it can choose to help Rome, or quietly finance Rome's enemies. Caesar wants stability, payment, and control of the situation before it turns into a bigger problem. So he sets up in Alexandria with the authority of Rome behind him, expecting the Egyptian royals to come to him and accept a solution. But the palace is already playing games. Cleopatra's enemies know Caesar is the ultimate judge in the room, so they try to control what he sees and hears. They want Caesar to view Cleopatra as the dangerous option, someone who will cause chaos, so he backs the brother they can control. And they keep Cleopatra physically out, because the simplest way to win a political war is to stop the rival from ever entering the room where decisions are made. So now the crisis becomes a countdown. Inside the palace, a young king surrounded by advisors who will do anything to keep Cleopatra out. Outside the palace, Cleopatra, locked out of her own capital, running out of time. And in the middle of it all, Julius Caesar, the man who can flip Egypt's future with one decision. If Cleopatra can reach him before her enemies decide she shouldn't reach anyone ever again. Cleopatra can't just walk into the palace to plead her case, because the palace isn't neutral territory, it's enemy territory. Her brother's faction controls the guards at the gates, the corridors inside, and the servants who report everything. If Cleopatra shows her face in daylight, she doesn't reach Caesar. She gets stopped at the first checkpoint, and the people holding the city don't need a public execution. They just need her to vanish quietly before anyone can react. Even worse, if she's caught trying to enter, it becomes proof that she's a threat, and Caesar is handed an excuse to back the safer option. So the normal route isn't just risky, it's impossible. That's why Cleopatra's next move depends on one person who isn't royal, but is absolutely essential: Apollodorus. Quick intro so you're not lost. Apollodorus is a loyal associate in Cleopatra's circle, the kind of man who can move through the city without causing alarms the way a queen would. He knows Alexandria, he knows the palace routines, and he knows how the guards think. Most importantly, he's willing to stake his life on Cleopatra's gamble, because if this goes wrong, he isn't arrested, he's executed. The plan is brutally simple, and that's what makes it terrifying. Cleopatra will be smuggled into the palace, hidden, carried in like cargo. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's the only way to cross the gates without the guards recognizing her. They'll search for a queen, they won't search for a bundle. The goal isn't comfort, the goal is invisibility. Cleopatra has to trust Apollodorus to get her past the gate checks, past the inner corridors, past servants loyal to her brother, and into the part of the palace where Caesar is staying, without a single shout, without a single mistake. And now the stakes tighten. Once she's inside that bundle, she can't change her mind. She can't talk her way out of trouble. She can't run if the guards stop them. For several minutes, Cleopatra's fate is literally in someone else's hands. One loyal ally carrying her through enemy territory toward the one room where the entire future of Egypt is about to be decided. Night drops over Alexandria, and now Cleopatra's plan stops being a plan and becomes a mission. Apollodorus chooses the timing carefully. Late enough that the city is quieter, but not so late that guards are asleep and suspicious of every movement. Cleopatra is hidden inside a tightly wrapped bundle. Tradition often describes it like a rolled rug or a linen sack, because the whole trick is that the guards are trained to spot a queen, not to inspect every piece of cargo like it's a living person. Cleopatra is taking the one route that turns her from a political target into something invisible. Apollodorus moves through the streets toward the palace like he belongs there. Quick detail that matters. Alexandria is a port city, used to deliveries, luggage, and foreign visitors. People carrying goods at night isn't automatically strange, unless the wrong person recognizes you. And that's the real danger. Not a random guard, but a palace insider, a servant loyal to the king, someone who knows Apollodorus is connected to Cleopatra. One shout is all it takes. The bundle gets opened. Cleopatra gets exposed. And then the story ends before it even reaches Caesar. They reach the palace gates. Apollodorus doesn't behave like someone sneaking in. He behaves like someone delivering something ordinary. That confidence is part of the disguise. Guards see a man carrying a heavy package and assume it's property, not a person. He gets waved through, step by step, deeper into the building where Cleopatra has been banned. Corridors, torches, footsteps, servants moving in silence. Cleopatra can't see anything, can't speak, can't even defend herself if someone decides to search. All she can do is wait and trust the timing. Then they reach the room where Caesar is staying, Rome's most powerful visitor, sitting inside a palace that's supposed to be controlled by Cleopatra's enemies. Apollodorus enters, sets the bundle down, and the final risk arrives. The reveal has to be perfect. If Caesar reacts the wrong way, if he thinks this is a trick or an ambush, Cleopatra doesn't get a second chance. The bundle opens. Cleopatra rises into the torchlight, alive, calm, and suddenly undeniable. Not a rumor, not a name being argued over by advisors. A real person standing in front of Caesar, face to face, inside enemy territory, after breaking through a palace designed to keep her out. And in that instant, the power balance shifts, because Caesar now has something her enemies tried to prevent at all costs. Cleopatra's story, delivered directly to him before anyone can twist it. But what matters next is Caesar's expression, because Cleopatra didn't just sneak into a palace. She just walked into a decision that can start a war. Caesar doesn't react like a shocked man who's been ambushed. He reacts like a judge who just received the most important evidence in the case. Cleopatra's entrance tells him two things instantly. She's brave enough to risk death to reach him, and she's smart enough to beat a palace security system that her enemies control. That's not just drama. Those are political skills. And Caesar didn't come to Egypt to watch a family argument. He came because Egypt's throne decides Egypt's money, Egypt's grain, and whether the Eastern Mediterranean stays stable or explodes. Cleopatra uses the only weapon that works on a man like Caesar: a clear offer. She frames herself as the ruler who can restore order, pay what Egypt owes, and cooperate with Rome instead of fighting it. She also attacks the trap around him, because Caesar is staying inside a palace controlled by her brother's faction, meaning every message he receives is filtered. Cleopatra's point is simple. You can't solve Egypt's crisis if you only hear one side. If Caesar wants stability, he needs the real power player standing in front of him, not the version her enemies invented. So Caesar makes his move. He doesn't choose Cleopatra in a romantic moment. He chooses control. He announces that he will arbitrate the dispute, and demands that Cleopatra and her brother both present themselves under his authority. He positions himself as the referee, the outsider who can impose a settlement. And that instantly flips the power balance, because Cleopatra is no longer a hunted exile outside the gates. She's now inside the decision room, backed by the most dangerous man in the city. The fallout is immediate. Cleopatra's brother, Ptolemy, realizes the nightmare scenario just happened. The rival he kept out has reached Caesar first. And the people around him panic, because they know they can't control Cleopatra the way they control a teen king. Two names matter here: Pothinus, the royal guardian who runs palace politics, and Achilles, the commander with soldiers who can turn a political crisis into a military one. They stop thinking about winning the argument and start thinking about removing the problem. Ptolemy storms out furious, and the city catches the emotion like fire. Caesar is suddenly framed not as a mediator, but as a foreign occupier interfering in Egypt's throne. Rumors spread, crowds gather, orders go out. The palace that was supposed to be a safe seat of power becomes a trap, with Caesar and Cleopatra inside it, surrounded by a city that can turn hostile in hours. And here's the terrifying part. Cleopatra's gamble worked, but it also triggered the one outcome she couldn't avoid. The moment Caesar puts himself between two Egyptian factions, the crisis stops being political. It becomes a countdown to war. Caesar's decision doesn't calm Egypt down, it detonates it. The moment Cleopatra is treated as a serious contender under Caesar's protection, her brother's faction stops negotiating and starts mobilizing. The palace becomes a pressure cooker. Caesar is a foreign power inside the capital. Cleopatra is the rival they failed to erase. And Alexandria is a city that can turn into a battlefield fast. What began as a secret entry now has consequences in the open. Soldiers gathering, factions choosing sides, and a throne dispute turning into a crisis that Rome can't simply walk away from. For Cleopatra, the risk multiplies. She didn't just win access to Caesar, she tied her survival to his decision-making. If Caesar backs down, she's exposed. If Caesar pushes forward, the city erupts. Either way, there's no return to quiet exile. That one night forced the world to pick a side. And from this point on, Cleopatra isn't just fighting her brother, she's fighting to stay alive in a war where losing doesn't mean stepping aside. It means being removed permanently. And that's why this moment matters. Cleopatra didn't win by raising an army first. She won by entering the most dangerous room in Egypt before anyone could stop her, and by forcing the most powerful man in the Mediterranean to take her seriously. But the price of that move is coming immediately, because Alexandria doesn't accept humiliation quietly. So here's the dark question. Was Cleopatra's plan genius? Or was it the moment she accidentally lit the fuse for something much bigger? If you want the next chapter, tell me in the comments. Do you want the story of how Alexandria turned into a siege, or the story of how Cleopatra's alliance with Caesar changed the entire Roman world?